Good afternoon, Joe. Thank you for taking time out. I know we're in the same continent, but still, I think you're an hour ahead. But
Right.
thank you for taking the time out to talk to me. I'll tell you one thing. I bought your book, Joe,
Thank you.
and it was incredibly compelling to read. Really, really compelling. And of course, I came across you and heard your story in Clubhouse.
Right.
And,
Okay.
and when I heard the story, I just knew we had to get you in the magazine, and I knew we had to get you on a podcast. And I think your title of the book is absolutely brilliant, where you say it's the untold story of the British family firm that became a global brand. And
Right.
you know, I couldn't have thought of a better title. So let's crack on. Let's look at the story of Reebok. Let's look at the story of the shoemaker himself, Mr. Joe Foster. So let's go back to when it all started. There's a saying, Joe, that the environment you grow up can shape the future you have. You're an entrepreneur, then my guess is, I've read the book, but my guess is you grew up in an entrepreneurial environment. Do you think that shaped in things that then emerged later on? Do you think that shaped you?
Well, I don't know, Ninder. I mean, it's when you say I grew up, I was born in 1935, which is 4 years before World War II. So I don't really know an awful lot about that. But World War II had 6 years of living in wartime, when it's blackout, and whatever. So it was certainly a different world than it is today. And I don't even think the word entrepreneur had been written into a dictionary by then. If it had, I certainly hadn't read it. So what was an entrepreneur? I think to a large extent, the entrepreneur side of, for me, when I look back on this, seems to have missed a generation and come from my grandfather. Because my grandfather, he set up his own company in 1895. He invented, so as they say, or he certainly developed, the spike running shoe. But my sort of early years during the war, yes, just like an ordinary kid, you're running about the streets, there's no lights on. And so in 1945, the war is over, I'm 10 years old, all of a sudden it's a different life. The lights come on, you can see things differently. During the war years, my brother, Jeff, you read of in the book, he and I, we were both in Boy Scouts, the Cubs, the Scouts. The church had a big influence in those days because that was your social life. You know, the church had everything. You went there, we played badminton, we were in Scouts, they had a social club. So everything revolved around the church. And this was the sort of life that impressed you. My father and his brother, they ran the family company after my grandfather died. He died in 1933, about 15 months before I was born, but I was born on his birthday, which is like, coincidence. And grandmother insisted he's brought his name with him. My mother, she didn't like the idea I was going to be called Joe, but grandma was a bit of a firebrand. You know, he's brought his name with him. So that's why I am named after my grandfather, Joe. But, and then we have a teenagers were brought up, but at 18, after only 1 year working in the actual factory, at the J.W. Foster factory, only 1 year, then taken away for 2 years doing national service. So when we say, was my life entrepreneurial? I don't feel that it was. I felt that I probably pushed against it, the life which was in the north of Bolton during the war and just after. And I think that probably what made me think a little differently was the discipline that I had with going in Scouts. The Scouts gave me discipline to begin with. And then secondly, 2 years of national service. That discipline of saying, you know, you've got to do things. You've got to look after yourself. It's important that, you know, if you want to get on in life, you've got to know what to do. You've got to make the right friends. You've got to do the right things. And you've got to persuade people of what you want. And if you read the book, you'll find that half of my national service I did playing badminton, which was great. So I was off playing badminton, and wouldn't anybody like to be playing the game that they like playing for most of the time? So I think I find it difficult to think that the entrepreneur side of me came from there. I think it came from seeing things not right. Because when we came back from national service and we looked at that J.W. Foster company, and it was a failing company. And we could see this. Jeff and I had these experiences. Jeff had been in Germany. He'd been seeing Adidas, Puma, what they were doing, came back to a company, and we were looking at our company. They were making the same shoes they'd been making in the 1930s. And we tried to change their minds, but we couldn't. So,
and of course, Joe, the business you referred to was being run by your father and his brother, wasn't it?
That's right. Yes.
By them. So when you came from the forces, you saw you brought in an external perspective. You saw things totally different to the way they were seeing things.
Well, exactly. I think they were just happy to just continue the business that they'd grown up with, that they just took over when grandfather died in 33. They took that over and they just continued the business. They didn't think forward. And I guess it's that 2 years of national service that made me think outside the box. This is not normal. Mother isn't making dinner anymore. She's not making a bed. She's not doing my washing. I have to get these things done a different way. So you learn a bit of self-preservation and belief that if you want things, you've got to go and get them yourself. And so I think that is what made me step out or think of we can do things differently. And I guess that's an entrepreneur. But I don't think the environment, certainly not the family environment. And it was quite late. We were quite well along our way with Reebok when we had enough time, enough money, enough people to look back at the Foster family, because we thought, let's have a look at our origins. And we found out so much more about grandfather than we'd been told. I have a book, this thick, of copies of articles in newspapers that grandfather used to sort of put in to expand his business. And and one of those goes on to say, if you can, or if you don't think that J.B. Foster's shoes are the best running shoes you've ever worn, we'll give you £100. I mean, and in those days, that's like, £100 is a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. So just recap for people listening in and watching. So your grandfather started the business. He got into the running side. He was very innovative. He understood marketing. From the book, it said you were getting a real cult following. Obviously, you weren't born then. Then, of course, he died. It passed over to the second generation, you being the third. Yes. You now come back so the operations running, you now come back with an external perspective. It was interesting reading the book, how you then challenged politely your father to see a different lens. He couldn't share that lens with you. You had the additional turmoil of watching the two brothers at odds. And so you took the incredible step. A lot of people don't do that. You and your brother walked away from your father's business and said, well, we agreed to disagree. We're off on our own. And that was the entrepreneurial, the risk taking at that young age to go on your own. And that must just have been an amazing set of circumstances. And of course, your brother walked with you. So just incredible to read that.
Yeah, well, I think that, I was 23. Jeff was 25. We were indestructible. What can go wrong? I talked to my father, and my father said, look, when I'm gone, This will be your business. You can do what you want with it. And all I could respond to that was, Dad, number one, we don't want you to go. We're not looking to that. But this business will be gone long before you are. And he still wouldn't listen. So we just had to do it. We were almost pushed into it. It's like, well, what do? Do you go down with a sinking ship? Or do you say, right, we know how to rescue this ship, but they won't allow us, so we have to build our own ship. And I'd say, we were 23 and 25. We were young. Nothing can go wrong when you're that young. Yeah, you're totally indestructible.
Well, sometimes ignorance is bliss, isn't it? What you don't know, and you say, well, let's just rock and roll. And of course, I then read the bit that you then set about trying to find somewhere to set up. It's incredible the way you bought old machinery. But what was the really interesting bit was that you then, if I get this right, you lived in the factory you bought to keep the overheads and the costs down. So astonishing that both of you were married and you all sort of accepted that as the sort of the steps to establishing a business. An incredible support structure.
Well, I guess again, I can only refer to our experience, and that is, when you're at home, everything's comfortable, everything's done for you. In the forces, if you want a good life, you've got to get on with it. And you when you're in your billets is not a big posh place. It's a place where with other mates, other people, you enjoy, you make the best of it. With the factory, what we went into, of course, was an ex-brewery. But the front of the property, which fronted onto a main road, there was living quarters. There was actual living quarters. So it wasn't as though we were living inside a factory. Yeah. We were living in these nice living quarters. They were nice, not much better than being in the forces. But when you're grown up to do things for yourself, to make your own life, to know that if it doesn't look nice enough, you can paint it, you can change it. And so I would think my wife was more destroyed than I was at the idea, because we just bought a nice bungalow and on deciding to go to the factory, we needed the money. So I had to sell the bungalow. And, but again, she was young also. So, I don't think you feel damaged at that age. I think you feel that we're taking a step forward, a step into our own destiny. And that was so exciting that what surrounds you is, doesn't matter what surrounds you. It's looking forward, it's focusing really on what you're wanting to do. And we were wanting to set up a factory. We wanted to set up our own brand. So I think that focus makes everything else, you don't look at the wallpaper, you don't look at all the, not such nice things at the time, but it's there. And living on the factory, of course, it meant you could get out of bed and start work. And then you didn't need to finish at a certain time, because you just walked through a door and you were back in your living area and enjoying that side of life. So
you certainly didn't have a commute to worry about.
No, just through a door, about maybe 10 meters.
Tell me, you speak about focus there, and that you were really focused. So what was the vision then? Did you even think you'd end up where you ended up, running £1 billion business? What was the focus? Did you think just to grow a big brand? Did you have a vision, or what was the end goal? Did you have one?
At that time, no. I think we can all dream and dream as big as we want to, but I think at that time it was a matter that we could see the future for JW Foster. We could see if we remained there, we would grow older. It may be 10 years before they went, but we'd be 10 years older. Would we have that same willingness to just strike out? Or if my father and uncle had died, could we rescue that business? And I think we knew that if we were going to do something, we had to there and then. We had to go. So I think once we got our, and I suppose we were lucky, really. I had Jeff and Jeff had me. We could bounce off each other. We could give each other encouragement, so that doing this, it wasn't as though you just sort of left and you'd know nobody with you. No, we were together. And Jeff loved being in the factory. He just loved making shoes. He was happy with that. And he wanted me to do everything else, which is okay. So I did the book work, everything else, marketing, designing, and of course, eventually all the traveling. And it was good having Jeff there. So really, we were, like I say, we were young, indestructible. Our vision was to make a successful company, be successful, just, you know, and where would it go? We knew nothing about business. All we knew is how to make a few pairs of shoes. We'd done college at night. We'd done some college at night before we did this. And that was so useful because not only did we learn a bit more about shoemaking as against what we'd learned at the factory, just running shoes and rugby boots, we learned shoemaking in general, but we made a lot of friends. All the people that were there were so willing to help us. You're setting your own company up. And they were behind us. You know, the people, the teachers, and they give us all the contacts we needed. Whatever you need this, go and see. So it begins to be about people. And, you know, if you're open and if you're talking and if you're excited and you've got the energy, people come with you. And so all these people at the college, they were happy to help us. Jeff stayed on at college and he did a day a week at college, well, even when we'd opened the company. And he did that to learn pattern making, to learn all the other extra bits that you need to know to run a company. So, you know, I just think we just had a vision rather than we had an end route. You know, and we talked so much these days about if you're in business, you've got what is your end story, where you're going.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, everything is trying to pre-plan because business, in those days, it was, we need a job. This is going to fail. We know what to do. We'll make our own shoes. We'll make our own sports company. And so that was it. And I think then what drives you after that is a company can't stand still. It's either going up or it's coming down. You know, the minute it plateaus, it's lost its drive. So it was always a matter of what's next. How can we push? So it was always looking to do more, looking to do better. It was,
I think it was 2 or 3 times where you spoke candidly or you wrote candidly about cash flow. And a lot of businesses, as we know, I think it's 80-90% go bust in the first 2 or 3 years because of cash flow. And what also became really obvious as I was reading the book was not only were you focused and driven, but you're incredibly resilient. So let me read out a little bit from your book around the problems of cash flow. And actually, it's around leadership. So you say, we've hit a serious cash flow problem, I began. There was no point beating around the bush, you said. I noticed a few of the workers, so you're addressing the workers, folding their arms defensively, expecting the worst. I explained the problems at Lawrence Sports, they were a distributor, and how their difficulties had now wrecked our finances. So I continued, starting from tomorrow, we're going to have to reduce production and temporarily lay some of you off. Some just meant over half, but I declined to say at this time. Then the questions came in thick and fast. How long for? Who's staying on? Will we get paid for this month? Which is really good. The next line, I answered them all completely honestly, emphasizing that it was a stopgap measure while we put in motion a recovery plan. We were always the last 2 people to get paid. That's you and your brother. And it was always been our owner ethic. That must have been a hard time to explain to all those workers what was going on and what was going through your mind as you were addressing them.
Well, you know, it's a time. A decision I had made was to go with Lawrence Sports because I knew the head salesman very well. He said, "Why don't we take over your sales?" I agreed. I signed the paper, and that gave me more time to think of other things. But that decision put all our company at that time not at risk. It was not at risk. it was when the head salesman, well, in fact, the owner of the Lawrence factory, he decided to retire. In came his son-in-law. My friend, who was the salesman, he just couldn't get on, so he left. So the Lawrence situation changed to the point where we were in a different situation. And that really, when that fell apart because the son-in-law didn't know how to operate the business, and that fell apart, that's what gave me the problem. So I had signed that piece of paper, but I knew all the people in the factory. I knew them all. I could look them in the eye. I could talk to them. And they were part of our company. We liked everybody to belong to that culture. And that culture was a winning culture. And it was also a passion. So whilst the staff, the people, our workers, were wondering what was happening, at least I could talk to them. And I felt the only way to do it was to talk and give them the story straight, tell them everything. They accepted it. Which, when you step out there and you say, well, what was it like? I was facing a big problem anyway. I didn't want them to have the problem, but I wanted them to have the truth. And the truth was that we needed to change direction. And I think it's like facing any problem. If you're willing to stand up there and face it, you find that there is an answer. And the answer was that more than half of them wanted to keep working without a wage. They would have worked without being paid. And that for me was like, well, that is loyalty. That is, anybody else, everybody who said, okay, can we come back as soon as things are right? Yes, we will send for you.
But Joe, that's a testament to your leadership, because you built a culture that imbued that loyalty, and you've done all the hard work during your leadership leading the company so that when the tough times came, and they do for every business, you could rely on that strong culture to get you through. So really, it's a testament to your leadership skills, apart from being the great setting up distribution deals and the products. But actually, that's all the traits of a really good leader, that the followers said, we're in it with you and we'll see it through.
Well, it was very good. And like I say, we did work with our people, the people who work for us. We wanted them to feel part of the company. So we always gave them the news. We always get good news as well as bad news. And it was, like you say, developing a culture is very, very important. To me, that is very important in any company. Certainly in your very early days, it's to get the right culture. And for us, it was a winning culture, and it was one of passion.
Now let's take from culture to down let's go, which was so obvious to read in the book. You had an extra dimension. So 75% of businesses in the UK do not export. They just don't export. But you saw the big picture and you went for America. You went for America with some real drive. So 2 questions. Why, unlike 75% of the business, I don't know what it was like at that time because they don't do it now. Why were you so exceptional in the fact that you saw something the rest of the businesses didn't? And why did you pick America? So why export and why America?
Well, I think there are a couple of answers to why America. America, for number one, had about 350 million people. Okay, Europe had about the same, but Europe also had about 20 languages and many different cultures. And really, from the north of Europe down to the south, you've got so many different cultures. People in Italy were wearing linen, whereas you got more north and towards Norway, and people are in wool and wrapped up, and the languages are so difficult. Okay, most of the countries, because of the commercial need, spoke English. Most of them in Europe, but not that good. And each was looking at a small market. So I'm looking to America, and I'm seeing America as one market. It's a big one, and I know it's a big one, and they do speak English, which helps. But the cultures, even in America, do change from the northeast to the southwest. They do change, but the thing is that the American personality, they were more happy to pick up on something new, and so that was the market for me. Plus the fact that the Board of Trade in those days, which is the English government, had decided they wanted people to export, and so I'm reading the magazine, which was a sports magazine, sports goods magazine, and there was the offer from the Board of Trade, from the government, that they would actually pay for a stand for us to go to America, to go to the NSGA show, which is the National Sporting Goods of America. They would pay for the stand, they would pay for our return airfare, and they'd also pay for 50% of our hotel bill and sustenance while we were there. Difficult to refuse, isn't it? You know, that's a good offer, that. So that was the first offer, and that was a help, because all during that was 1968, and it was 1979 before I eventually got my distributor. So I had 11 years, backwards and forwards, so many failures, but the government were paying for the airfares, they were paying for the site, the stand. Okay, I did make one or two other trips because I had to into America, but for the main part, I had the government's help. So if you've got it there, we used it. And then there's a lot of luck. I knew that market was big. You know, we were in athletics. Unfortunately, football, Adidas had that well tied up even then. Back in the 1960s, they had it well tied up, and it would have cost a lot of money to go in. But we talk again, come back to my grandfather. Back in 1920, and we have a replica of the letterhead from 1920s. And he was supplying, and there's about 92 clubs. He supplied all the athletes at the Antwerp Games in 1920, Olympic Games.
Wow.
And also he was supplying 92 football and rugby clubs. And I don't think you could mention a British rugby football clubs in Narinder, Liverpool, Arsenal, Man United, Man City. He's supplying them direct. All these Glasgow Rangers, Celtic, all of them are on there. And I can send you one of these if you like, a replica of this. It's amazing, the teams. So he was supplying football boots, football training shoes, the whole thing. So, and I don't know where that generation missed it, but by the time Jeff and I were there, we had lost it. But the main thing was that we were then in running. And running, nice business. In the UK, yes, we had a lot of athletes, so we could have a nice business. But you look at America, and you look at every college and every university, they have coach. And coach was a god. And you could go to university on a scholarship, on an athletic scholarship. You couldn't do that in the UK. So a lot of shoes were needed. In fact, Foster's themselves had a contract with Yale University, and they were sending 200 pairs a month to Yale University for quite a few years. I have the contract right now. It's in Boston in the Reebok archive, where it should be. But so they had I knew that market was so big. And when we went across that first time in '68, running, very small. And Runner's World, which was a magazine, was just a simple black and white one page. By 1975, running had grown enormous. So when we're lucky, we were in running. Running is growing in America. This is where we need to be. And I kept on trying, because I knew if we could get the hook, as the Americans will refer to it, that hook, if we could get that, we would be in America. And that came about with our Aztec. Well, Runner's World grew to become a big glossy magazine, and everybody read the magazine, which meant that if we could get a shoe, which Runner's World, they were rating shoes. They got so big, they could tell you which shoe you should wear. And of course, that's not very good for people making shoes, because if they're not saying they should wear your shoe, they used to rate shoes during the mid 70s, even 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you became number one, all of a sudden you had an order for 1 million pairs. It was as simple as that. But, you know, that would have been Nike in those days. But Nike was importing from Japan. And could Nike increase their production to that amount? No. So you were letting your customers down. Retailers were being let down. And they didn't want that. So they changed it. Bob Anderson of Runners World changed it to a star rating where you could have 4 5-star shoes. That would be like 4 number ones. That was the point I knew we could get there.
So just before we build on what did happen, again, you make a brilliant comment. We still talk about this now, is everybody knows London. So you can imagine if you'd said we're from Bolton or Bury, my gosh. But what you said was really funny. You said, we started to get a lot of interest in Reebok shoes from retailers, but when they asked where they could get them from, I gave them my business card, which they would peer at with confusion. England, they said, what state is that in? They'd inquire. I would then say, in Britain, eventually the penny would drop. England, near London. I mean, that is just so hilarious. And, you know, that still happens today. So, okay, so 12 years persistence. I mean, that is incredible. Flying back and forth into America. So even when you were 7th or 8th year in, did you not think of giving up and thinking this is just not going to happen?
I don't know. That's maybe that is maybe that persistence. It's maybe that drive. It's maybe that energy. Because even 5 or 6 years in, I must have failed about 6 times. I had distributors. I had an ex-Adidas distributor, because Adidas, they had 6 different distributors in America, and they decided no, they were going to bring it to 1. So Clifford Severn, he was down in California. He came in and said he would try. He would like to be the distributor. I tried with him. I tried with Shu Lang, who you've probably read that.
Yeah.
I had 3 or 4 years attempting with Shu to try and get in there. We're trying to do it. And I think what you realize is that, yes, number one, you need something special to get in there. And that was the hook. And we hadn't got it at that time. Number 2 is you require a lot of money to finance this, because it's impossible for us to, in those days, impossible for us to stock enough product so that when somebody in America, a distributor wanted it, he would send his order in, and then we had to sort of make it. And it never seemed to work. It was something that, somewhere around here, there was something missing. And that is financing the whole thing. Because the distributor, if he was going to finance it, he needed a lot of money. And I could never find anybody with a lot of money. I don't think those sort of people were there at that time. Running, it was fairly new, but it was big. So I was always expecting that maybe I would team up with somebody like Bill Bryan. Bill Bryan was quite a large distributor, not distributor, but a large retailer who would probably have been a good distributor. And I sent him lots of shoes and we did lots of things, but it was that, trying to find the hook. And it was really, once Runners World announced they were, instead of putting shoes as 1, 2, and 3, they were going to go to star rating. I knew I could get a 5-star. It was that simple. But to get there, we had to manufacture the shoe. We had to get those shoes over to Runners World, and they had to test them. We ourselves had tested the shoes out. We were doing quite nicely. We were sponsoring athletes, and we had quite a few of the British athletes at Edmonton in 1978. And we picked up a lot of gold medals for the Commonwealth Games. And we had 3 shoes. We called them the Gold Range. And the Gold Range was Aztec, that was the trainer. Then there was Midas. Midas, that was the road racing shoe. And then there was Inca, and Inca was the spike track shoe. So we put all these into Runners World, but we wanted the Aztec, because that was the big one, the training shoes. Everybody wore the training shoes to go onto the road. But like I say, it was 1979, and I tested this shoe, But in 1979, running had become so big in America that a lot of people were looking to join in. And Kmart came to see me in 1979 in February and looked at the shoe and said, you know, we'd love to sell you shoes. And they wanted to order 25,000 pairs. Well, like 25,000 pairs. That was half a year's work for our factory. But we knew that if we got a 5-star shoe, we'd need help. And so I would come back to people again. I had my friend who'd been at Lawrence Sports, who we'd had a problem with, he'd gone to Bata, and Bata were the biggest shoemakers in the world. And he persuaded them that they could make the Reebok shoes, right? But also Kmart wanted a better price. And also we knew at that time that production had gone to the Far East. Production was in South Korea, Taiwan, all those places. And we knew that the price they could produce was less than half the price that we could produce at. And, you know, we couldn't compete with that. But we had been talking with people who had agents working with the South Koreans. So, you know, we were ready on both sides to do what we could do. And so it was in June of 79. That's when the ratings came out with Runner's World. But apart from Kmart coming to me at the NSGA show, also Paul Fireman came. And Paul Fireman, he and his brother and his brother-in-law, they were running a small camp in Boston, Boston Camping. It was a small wholesaler in Boston, Boston Camping. They were doing tents, fishing lines, you name it, fishing rods, all the bits and pieces. And I could tell from Paul that he was a bit tired of doing this. He'd done it so many times. They were going round and round every year, just selling whatever they were making, but not making much money. And he said, Joe, I love to be your distributor. We need a 5-star shoe. He'd also read Runner's World, so he knew we need a 5-star shoe. I said, Paul, come on, look at this. I showed him our Aztec. I said, this is a 5-star shoe. He said, is it a 5-star shoe? I said, it will be in June, believe me. And of course, he'd been happy to believe me, but he said, look, if we get a 5-star shoe, I'm in. Right. I think August was the magazine, but it came out of the last week in July. So it was last week in July, and I phoned Paul and said, Paul, can you get down to a kiosk and pick up a Runner's World? I think it's out now. It was a bit early in the morning for him because it was lunchtime for me, but it was only about 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning for him. So it was a bit dozy. And however, an hour later he came back. Joel, Aztec, 5 stars. That was it. That was the moment we had made it. We'd reached America. That was our hook. But then he said, Midas and Inca, they also got 5 stars. So in all the categories, we got 5 stars. And that was it. We were in.
But your big break, so actually, before we got to the big break, it was interesting. I was in a conversation with a couple of my friends. We were talking about recruiting salespeople and how difficult it can be. And almost you were recruiting in a distributor a salesperson. And the question we were wondering, and I think I know your answer is going to be, is that do you point someone on mindset, they share your vision? Do you point them on their skill set, or do you point them on their experience? So when you go to all these distributors you were appointing, and we'll talk about how you got to the rest of the world, what were you looking for when you were sitting opposite a potential distributor?
Well, with Paul, it was somebody who had a desire, who was hungry, who needed something. And it was not that need. It wasn't just the fact that, okay, we'll be your distributor, but I think we can do a good job. No, he needed it. He was so tired with his Boston Camping and what they had that there was no motion, no movement. You needed somebody, and the Americans call it somebody with a wrinkle in the belly. You need somebody who's hungry. You need somebody who wants. And Paul Feynman wanted. Paul Feynman he was a man. Now I thought, well, this is brilliant. We can bolt this onto Boston Camping. Boston Camping already has reps. They're wholesalers. They know how to do it. However, Boston Camping is the outdoor trade, whereas we're in the sports trade. That didn't worry me too much. But the next time I went, Paul agreed, right, I'm going to be a distributor. That's it. And the next time I went to Boston, Paul picked me up at the airport and took me to his office. It wasn't Boston Camping. And I said, what's happened to Boston Camping? Why are you here? Oh, he said, we closed it. They'd closed Boston Camping. And the three of them had gone their own ways. Paul was going to be Reebok, and his brother, he'd gone off making wallets. I think they called them snap wallets in those days. They were used by Velcro. And his brother-in-law had gone to open a car lot, a second-hand car lot. So I'm thinking, we don't have a company, but at least Paul is energetic, and at least he knows his business. So let's go with it. And so that was the start. And of course, the thing is that he had many, many orders and people wanting the product before he got it. And it was keep holding the people off. Yeah, knowing that you've got a 5-star shoe, it's how do you manage to get your production? And it took us a while, but barter did come up. Barter came up with the goods. However, if you've read the book, you'll know that the barter product didn't work.
Yeah.
It just didn't work. In a way, that may have helped Paul survive those early days because not many people knew the difference. We did. They changed the shape of the upper. They changed things on it.
Yeah.
But the worst thing that they had was the fact that EVA, which was a new sort of rubber, it was a plastic rubber. EVA was very new in those days, very new, and everybody used it. We were using it, but barter, they didn't buy it in. They had their own rubber plant. And so they made their own EVA. And unfortunately, on a certain batch, they hadn't got the right curing. And so when it was in the shoes, it was collapsing. And people were sending the shoes back. You know, had this been in the UK, that would have been the end of our existence. In America, they didn't worry. They sent the shoes back and Paul Feynman just sent them a new pair. And so it went on. He had 20,000 pairs. And he didn't pay for any. At the end, because they were faulty, he didn't pay for it. And in between time, we were looking at the Far East, and we got the Far East online. The only problem is that barter were giving Paul a credit line. In fact, he got his 20,000 pairs, and he never paid. For Far East, you had to put a banker's draft up there. You had to do something. It all became letter of credit. So you either had to have the money or the bank was willing to fund it. That became a problem. And that's where, fortunately, Paul, through a friend of a friend of a friend, managed to bump into Stephen Rubin. Yeah. Stephen Rubin is Pentland in the UK. Yeah, Pentland now, JD Sports, they're very big. And Stephen didn't want to be part of Reebok. But what Stephen was, he was a sourcing company. His ASCO company was a sourcing company out of the Far East. And so he was willing to give that credit line. So it wasn't a matter of giving a lot of money. He gave Paul a credit line. And that's all that Paul needed. Once Paul had a credit line, the rest is history because he could buy as many shoes as he could sell.
So that got you a foothold. But what was to come next was what broke you through. And you can tell the story around aerobics and women in particular, because whilst the 5 stars got you in, but actually what made you huge, and we'll go through the numbers in a few minutes, was the spotting an opportunity. And more importantly, a lot of entrepreneurs spot it, but don't move on it, prevaricate, and some of the opportunities lost. But in this instance, the opportunity was seized, and it was the making of Reebok. Perhaps you can tell us the story.
Well, it all comes about with Arnold Martinez. He's in the book. I don't know if you've heard of Arnold Martinez. He he was a tech rep in Los Angeles. A tech rep goes around. He doesn't sell the shoes. He goes in to show the guys all the good features of the shoes, what they should be doing, and talk about the product as against being just a salesman. And so he's a tech rep in California. But his wife, Frankie, she's coming back from these aerobic classes. And she's coming back with her friends, and they're all full of it. Wow, this is great. And Arnold's saying, what's all this about? Aerobic. What do you mean aerobic classes? Well, what are you doing? Well, we're exercising to music, and it's great. And she was that full of it that Arnold said, look, next time you go, I'm coming with you, which he did. He went down to the class. He sees the instructor in running shoes, half the class in running shoes, the other half no shoes at all. So he thinks, well, light bulb moment. This is an opportunity, surely. Why don't we make a shoe just for these girls, just a woman's shoe? Off he goes to Boston, having a word with Paul Feynman. And Paul listens very, very carefully and said, Arnold, what are you talking about? A few girls jumping about down there in LA. It's nothing. We've got a good business. Look, we're selling running shoes. We're now a running shoe company and we're doing really nicely. What do we want to do playing around by making a few shoes for, what was it called? Aerobics. No. Arnold wasn't put off. So Arnold went round the back door and he had a word with the production people. And he said, look, this is my idea. A nice, simple, white glove-like upper, nice cushion sole, nothing much, just nice and simple, just for these girls. Can you make me 200 pairs? Well, he was persuasive with the production guys, and they made him his 200 pairs, which he distributed down there in Los Angeles amongst this growing band of instructors and some of the top girls down there. The rest is history. They just loved the shoe. And they made it out of glove leather, which is fantastic. But glove leather is 1 millimeter thick at the best. And to make the shoe, since we're using the leather side, we'd made running shoes out of glove leather, but we use the suede side. So adhesive, you're straight into the suede. But this, you had to take the top of the leather off, which meant you had less than 1 millimeter of leather, which was like, dangerous. And yes, give them a month, maybe 6 weeks of work, they were falling apart. Again, another time when we would have been out of business in the UK, that would have been terrible. But in California, America, California, the girls loved them so much it didn't matter. They just threw them away and bought another pair. And it just spread. And then you got people like Jane Fonda wearing them in her videos, in her fitness videos. And it just went wild. And you have the numbers. You can describe them if you like. But
yeah,
yes.
Yeah, well, it was astonishing. I mean, I've got the numbers here. In 5 years, you went from 9 million to 30 million to 90 million to 300 million, astonishingly, to 900 million. I mean, that's just extraordinary. So I suppose I've got just a couple of questions to ask around that growth. Well, firstly, we must say you are now by this stage by yourself because your brother unfortunately passed away.
That was a
some time back.
Big sad.
Yeah, and so the fact that you were able to pick yourself up and still keep going back to America and still keep pushing, I mean, those numbers are astonishing. So I suppose a problem with scaling, because you were doing scaling on just another, honestly, it's just another dimension. Normally, companies fall over because of systems, people, and finance. But you obviously got all of those three right, particularly the finance you spoke about. Were there any other problems, such as the rapid growth, or did everything just seem to fit, or was it just the people you surrounded yourself? How did you scale so quickly?
I think this is a matter of luck now. This is where our luck comes in. You know, already we got into a running craze, which has allowed us to get into USA. Then Arnold spotted aerobics, and then we had Stephen Rubin, who loved to be the sourcing company. So with a sourcing company in place, and with now having these 5 stars, now finding aerobics, right, what is your biggest problem? Stephen was providing the money, but how do you go? Probably the first couple of years, not too bad. But, when you go, you're talking about 300,000, 300 million to 900 million. What's your biggest problem? What's your biggest problem?
Finance. Was it?
Product.
Yeah.
How do you get that much product? How can you go, where can you get it from? That was a big problem. Now, this again is, were we lucky? Yes, we were lucky. Nike, who had been racing ahead of us for quite some time, they hit a wall. They suddenly found that their business, just a minute, they had to pull out of a couple of factories. We were ready. We just moved in. Is that luck? Yes. Good fortune. Let's put it in good fortune. So the good fortune was that we could do it. I sat down with Paul on a number of times, and Paul used to say, Joe, these orders, we're being swamped. It's incredible. He said, I know how to stop it. But he said, if I do, I don't know how to start it again. And that was the problem. In America, this was growing incredibly. And so fortunately, Nike ran into a wall at that point, and we were managing. So all the answers came at the right time. And yes, we had to work to get into America. We had to work to get the finance. But that bit of luck, getting that production that Nike had to pull out, Reebok went in. That was fabulous, and that took us to almost $1 billion. So, and then the company kept on growing, of course. And once you've got that momentum, that was okay. The momentum kept us going until I think it was just short of $4 billion when, at the end of 1989, I retired. I moved out.
And that was going to be my question. My question was, before we look at lessons learned, you went from 9 to 30 to 90 to 300 to 900, then 4 billion. And at that point, you decided, I'm off. Why did you suddenly decide a multi-billion-pound operation? Did you suddenly decide, I'm off? What was it that made you decide?
You look at the company at that point. We started off with a factory with Jeff and myself working in there, and a few people working and helping. And by the time we get to 4 billion or 1 billion, it was, we've got lawyers, we've got accountants, and we've got people who are used to selling groceries, selling boxes and boxes and boxes of shoes. What am I doing? I'm putting on the rest of the world. I'm putting on global distribution. And during about 10 years after signing with Paul, I'd put on another 30 countries. So I signed deals and got the distribution going globally. We had the best distribution of anybody. It was great, fancy. But then I got to that point, where am I? I'm at least 2 or 3 times a month, I'm flying 35,000 feet. I'm going to whatever city I'm going to. I'm picked up by a limousine. I'm going to the best hotels, and we go out to the best restaurants having a meal. And the challenge is over. For me, now that sort of challenge belongs to somebody else. And I think you have to know when you're no longer putting an addition. You're just somebody. You're just a piece. This needed other energies, other people. And it's better to let them drive, let them take it forward. For me, I was just more of I was becoming an ambassador, and that's not really. I'd gone through so many challenges, so much of the energy had gone in that direction that what did I want to do? I wanted to step back. But for all of wanting to step back, it's a bit like the Eagles at Hotel California. You can check out, but you can never leave.
Yeah, they do say that's quite a difficult. It's quite a difficult transition to make. Now, let me go into a chapter in the book, and this is really good. It's about reflections, and you talk about the chapters entitled "Who and What Made a Difference." And there's really two things you say in there which resonated with me. One was you said, surround yourself with really good people. And in particular, you mentioned a lawyer who, by the way, got you out of a real pickle when it came to intellectual property. And then you kept him on board. By the way, he helped you with the Reebok name. And we won't go there, but from Mercury to Reebok. But you obviously spotted a good lawyer. So your contention, which a lot of entrepreneurs have got to the level you did, is that it is about people and the right people around you.
Yes, definitely it is. You need the people. One of my philosophies was that, okay, you're running a company. Who do you employ? And it's better to employ people who come to you. People who show, oh, I'd like to work for you. Rather than saying, well, I have a position here, I have a position here. You know, through your development as you grow, you meet a lot of people. And it's nice to ask the right people to come and work. And again, you know, if somebody, you know, it's no use employing somebody who can't do the job better than you. What you want are people who can do it better. And I always wanted to find people who could do one of the jobs that I was doing, could do it better than me. And if they could do it better than me, fine. And then it's saying to them, look, I don't want you to bring me problems. Don't bring problems to me, just bring me answers. And if it's a question that you have a couple of answers that you want to discuss, then we'll do that. We'll chat about which one of the two. If you've got a bit of problem, but just bring me answers. So in other words, you wind them up and you're on your own. You do it. Get on with it. And you usually find that people do a really good job. If they're not the right people, you soon find out, they soon find out. And it's better to just say goodbye. But then the right people, get the right people.
You sounded just like a bank manager. Don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions. Let me now take the second bit, which is sort of related to what you said. And it's really well the way you put it. It's let me just quote out of the book. There's only one way to find the right person, and that's to put yourself in as many situations as you can where you get to meet as many people as possible. Networking can be a numbers game. Sometimes you're lucky and meet the right person at the right time within minutes. Sometimes it can take years. But you have to fully believe that the gatekeeper is out there somewhere, and it's your job to find him or her. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant. It talked about talent acquisition, talked about networking, and the fact that you need to be on the lookout all the time.
Well, you do indeed, because you know you, and that's why for me it was always about Reebok. It was never about Joe Foster. Joe Foster's not important. What is important is Reebok, and that's got to be important to everybody that comes along to be part of that company. I don't say work for it, because at a certain level, you are part of that company. You can employ, well, not employ, but you can actually sort of go and find an agency. You know, you can use an agency for many things, but the people that join you should be part of your team. Should feel the same way you feel. Should be thrilled and delighted at success, and be somewhat destroyed when things are not going right, but ready to pick themselves up and know how to find the answers, know where to go. So people have to have commitment.
There's lots of other tips in there which we won't discuss now, because I'll encourage people to buy the book so they can read the book, and there's some real great tips in there. But since you've left Reebok, you know, took it to 4 billion sales, the industry has changed. Is it now more about fashion than performance, do you think? Do you think people now buy because of the logo and the brand rather than the performance of the product? Or is that always still performance matters?
Well, when my grandfather was influencing people by giving them shoes, that was to influence other performers, other people in the same sport. When Jeff and I got into it, Adidas were already influencing street. all the replica T-shirts. They were selling replica T-shirts. So that's their business. And oh yes, by the time I left, we were becoming fashion. You talk now to anybody from Adidas or Nike, and they call themselves fashion companies now, because everything is street. Everything has gone over. That's where the volume is. So the influences, and so sport, you've got to find what influences the street, what influences people to buy your product. And for 90% of the people, it's sport. Sport has so many influences. But now, I mean, there are influencers who do nothing more than that. They just become influencers. And in America, there's a lot. Yeah, the Kardashians, they're just influencing people. So it's a question of finding out what influences. And yes, I mean, you know, you're right, Ninder. Things have changed. Things have changed now. And everybody's into trying to influence. We're now onto podcasts like this. You know, it's all these things. Life has changed. Computers now, you know, the social media. This is now producing influences, and so everything has changed. So it's a matter of really saying, well, what next? Where do we go next? Sport is one of those things. You know, I mean, ever since we were in business into early 1960s, right up to, in fact, right up to COVID, sport and the business of sport has always continued. It's never had a recession. We never met a recession. We just kept growing. And it's only because COVID has stopped sport that the business has found itself in a bit of trouble. Well, everybody's got that bit of trouble. It will come through. But sport will continue to grow. It's got to. I mean, that's what people do. People get more time. People have more desires to participate or watch. And, you know, are watching sport these days. You know, you can cricket is a very good example, I think, of what photography has done now. What they can do now with the cameras. I mean, the cameras, they can watch that ball turn very slowly. They can watch it pitch, and it might only move a fraction. You wouldn't see that at full speed, but at this speed, you can see it. And you're almost on the pitch. You're almost watching it. So, you know, so where are we going? Is it going to be three-dimensional? Is it going to be in our living rooms? You know, where are we going with this? So it's the technology. And I think if you follow the technology, this is going to be where the influencing is. And I don't know what this is going to be, but the technology is coming along at an enormous rate. And let's put it this way, COVID has pushed it. COVID has pushed these Zoom meetings, probably saved 10 years.
Well, in the past, either you would have flown to me or I would have had to fly to you. In the old, when you were going back and forth to America, one of us would have had to fly now or get on the train, but quite a distance.
Whatever. We'd have had to travel. We'd have to meet. Yes. Now, I mean, this is so easy and it's so comfortable. It's become comfortable because you can't do these other things. You can't meet in other ways. So this is now comfortable. The early days of doing things on your computers, it seemed a bit difficult, seemed a bit sort of awkward, because when we meet up, the first thing we'll probably talk about is the weather. Wow, how's this going on? How are the kids, by the way? You know, all those conversations go on, and then you get to business, and business is a bit sort of, oh, right, yeah, okay, well, that's fine. Now let's go. I'm going out for a meal. You know, that's how we use. I think that Zoom, this now brings us into that level. Okay, we can't go out for a meal, but you know, we will do eventually. But it brings us together. It brings people together so much, and you don't need a lot of the travel that I had to do would probably have been saved. I say that. But again, you know, we all need to meet up on occasions, and it's good to do that. But this is incredible.
Well, you strike me, Joe, as somebody who hasn't been now running the business for a number of years, as incredibly energetic. You have loads of energy. So, do you think you could be heading for Reebok again? Because rumors are that Adidas are looking to divest. Reebok could be going somewhere else. could that be just the opportunity for the phoenix to rise? Because it's not been, I could be wrong, it's not been quite the force it was when you were around, when you were at the helm. And do you think there's any, by the way, do you think that rumour's wrong, or do you think there is some big plan?
There will be a new team, new people, good ideas, young people, people who understand the technology better than me, understand and meet with people. But I'm here. I'm very happy to support what energy it is, to tell them the history, to show them that you can do it if they need that enthusiasm. And it would be nice to support the people. We just, it's only 3 weeks ago now, we sent 15 books. Well, they bought 15 books from Boston. The CEO and his team bought 15 books. And it was only 3 weeks ago we sent them. So they all have the book now. So hopefully, they can get something out of it. And if I'm wanted. And I've also done 4 interviews with the Reebok teams around the world. Two from Europe, one from France, one from Latin America. So they've sort of said, Joe, can you come on? Can we interview you? Yeah. So it's get that enthusiasm. People need that drive. They need that energy. You need to feel that yes, now this is it. There will be big problems, of course there will. But I look on what will happen, and yes, there'll be global problems for Reebok because everything's mixed in with Adidas at the moment. Boston isn't. Boston stands alone. So we've got to defeat America again. That's what we've got to do. USA and that's got to be target. So yes. So if anybody out there, and we have talked to 1 or 2 people who ask questions, and they're interested in buying the Reebok brand, and so they ask questions. I'm quite happy to answer those questions, and I'm quite happy to be there when the day comes. I'm quite happy to be there. That if they want some encouragement, want somebody to come along and say, yes, I'm the man.
Final question. I mean, there's so many other questions I could ask you, but we've been chatting for ages now. What 3 lessons? Because you've been through the lot, you've done everything, from humble beginnings, the north of England, and it's just astonishing when people read the book and see this as well. You took it into global dominance. You took on the big boys, the Nike, the Adidas, Puma. So what 3 lessons would you give to entrepreneurs of today, people who are just starting up or just now scaling? What 3 pieces of advice would you give them, or lessons would you give them, because of the amazing success you've had?
Well, it's difficult to give anybody sort of lessons. Reading the book is a good thing because they can pick up what they want to pick up from there. But certainly be a people person. Work with people. Work close with people. People will help you. It's amazing what they will do for nothing. A lot of people will do that. Believe in yourself as well. Don't ask too much. Don't look or seek too much advice. Just believe as far as you can see, and don't worry, because if you try to see beyond that, you will run into everybody's problems. You'll get the problems before you have them. You may not meet those problems. Don't seek the problems. They will find you. But believe in yourself. I think it's so important to believe in yourself, believe in people. And the 3 most important things to remember is have fun, have fun, have fun.
Right. Well, Joe, your royalty. I mean, this has just been absolutely fascinating. You've mixed with royalty. You've mixed with film stars. You've sat alongside the most brilliant, legendary sports people. You took a brand that was completely unknown from the north of England. You spent 12 years trying to break America. You broke America, but more importantly, you smashed America with your new products aimed at the segment. And I love the line, you then bowed out when you thought it was the right time to leave. but I love your last argument. Your last assertion. It's all about fun, having fun, and having fun during your journey. Joe, it's been remarkable. I would strongly recommend, I've read 3 bits out of here, that you read The Shoemaker. It covers everything from entrepreneurship to globalization to marketing to distribution to product development. And most of all, it's all about people. Joe, thank you very much for sparing the time. Thank you very much for putting it in your diary. And thank you very much for sharing the most incredible journey that I've had the pleasure of reading about and talking to you about. Thank you very much.
Ninder, it's been an absolute pleasure for me as well. And it's good. The more people that know the story, that share the energy, the better it will be for Reebok. So thank you for the invitation and all the best for today.
Thank you very much. We'll stay in touch, and au revoir, I think, is probably the right way to finish, because you're in France, I think.
We are in France, yes. We are in France. So au revoir, or see you later.
See you later. Thank you, Joe.